The Soviets had designed, built and flown some of the most interesting planes we have ever seen. Today we are picking at my choice of best 5 Soviet jet aircraft that were not only prototypes, but flown and were in combat service. At number 5 we have MiG-17. The Soviet MiG-17 fighter was designed to be more stable than its predecessor, the MiG-15. When it first appeared, Western analysts gave it the Allied codename Fresco A and thought it to be nothing more than a lengthened MiG-15. It was, in fact, a new design that improved on the problems found in earlier designs. The MiG-15 was unstable at high speed, and too tight a turn could cause an uncontrolled snap roll and spin. To overcome this problem, the fuselage was lengthened, small fences were installed on the upper surfaces of the wing to control airflow, and the wings swept back 45 degrees. The extra room in the fuselage enabled the internal layout and systems to be revised, and a more angular tail was added. These changes gave the aircraft great stability, essential for an effective weapons platform. The resulting prototype, the I-330, flew in the early 1950s, and the MiG-17 entered frontline service in February 1953. The Fresco A maintained the original VK-1 turbojet of the MiG-15. A VK-1F engine with afterburner was then fitted to the new Fresco C, or MiG-17FA. Fixed scan radar was added to the MiG-17PF, or Fresco D. The MiG-17PFU, Fresco E, became the Soviet Union's first interceptor with its cannon deleted and 4 air-to-air missiles added. Czechoslovakia also produced the MiG-17 as the S-104. Poland produced a STOL aircraft from the MiG-17, the LiM-5M, a close support LiM-6 and the LiM-5P, a standard MiG-17F. China also produced the MiG-17F and MiG-17FP, using the designations J-5 and J-5A. Considered obsolete in the 1960s, North Vietnamese pilots flew MiG-17s against American aircraft during the Vietnam War. More rare than the MiG-15, only about 10 MiG-17s currently fly in the United States, and one is being rebuilt in Australia. At number 4 we have a Soviet counterpart of American A-10, which is Su-25. Like the American A-10 Warthog, the first Soviet jet dedicated by design to CAS, close air support, the Frogfoot has durability and firepower. In February 2012, the Sukhoi Su-25, NATO reporting name Frogfoot, celebrated 37 years of its maiden flight, 31 years of its formal induction into squadron service, and 25 years of its formal entry into service with the Soviet Air Force. It was the Soviet Air Force's first mass-produced jet purposely designed for the close air support (CAS) role, and is a simple, effective and durable attack workhorse that, by 2012, had seen combat in no fewer than 40 conflicts. The Su-25 received its baptism of fire 5 years after its maiden flight during Operation Ram in Afghanistan in 1980. This operation saw the new aircraft go through its field evaluation and testing in real World War conditions. As many as 630 Su-25 Frogfoot as were built between 1979 and 1991 at the Georgia-based aircraft plant now known as TAM, Tbilisi Aircraft Manufacturing, for the Soviet Air Force, as well as 185 Su-25KS for export, while no fewer than 70 Su-25 UBUBK Frogfoot B2-seaters rolled off the production line at the aviation plant in Yulin, Europe, Russia. Currently, there are plans to resume production of the 2-seater variant, with state-of-the-art avionics and the latest weaponry to replace those Su-25s dating from the mid-late 1980s that are still in service. The Frogfoot is known as the most cost-effective ground attack aircraft available to the Russian Air Force, RUF, and, between the RUF and the Russian Navy's aviation assets, there are some 200 to 220 Su-25s still in operation today, though only half of that number is airworthy at any one time. As with many Soviet designs, the Su-25 has been widely exported, with 25 nations operating variants of the Frogfoot at one time or another, and it remains in service 19 of these states, a testament to its effectiveness and reliability. At number 3 we have the MiG-21. The MiG-21 is probably one of the best-known Soviet aircraft flown by many nations and built in larger numbers than any warplane since World War II. It was designed in response to Korean War needs for a short-range interceptor and light strike fighter. First flown in 1955, the MiG-21 was the first Soviet plane to reach Mach 2. For 3 decades, variants of the MiG-21 went head-to-head with the F-4 Phantom and other American-made fighters in Cold War-related conflicts worldwide. Soviet fighters like the MiG-21 are designed and built differently from their Western counterparts. American fighters such as the F-4 are large, sophisticated, two-engine, two-person aircraft designed to carry out many different missions. The MiG, on the other hand, is a relatively small defensive fighter built with traditional materials and simple manufacturing. Why make them basic? Soviet aircraft can be built fast, cheap, and in large numbers. In combat, MiGs are tough, simple, rugged planes that can operate from unprepared airfields with minimum logistical support and be maintained by simple, basically unskilled labor. In the mid-1980s, MiG-21s were in service with at least 37 air forces worldwide. At number 2 is famous MiG-15. MiG-15, also called NATO designation, Faggot, single-seat, single-engine Soviet jet fighter, built by the Mikoyan-Gurevich Design Bureau and first flown in 1947. It was used extensively in combat during the Korean War, 1950-53. The MiG-15 was the first all-new Soviet jet aircraft, one whose design did not simply add a jet engine onto an older piston engine airframe. Employing swept-back wings, a tail fin, and horizontal stabilizers to reduce drag as the plane approached the speed of sound, it clearly exploited aerodynamic principles learned from German engineering at the close of World War II. It was powered by a centrifugal flow engine that had been licensed from the British company Rolls-Royce and then upgraded by the Soviet manufacturer Klimov. Deliveries to the military began in 1948. Designed as a bomber interceptor, the MiG-15 carried a formidable armament of two 23mm guns and one 37mm gun firing exploding shells. In November 1950, the appearance over North Korea of MiG-15s, bearing Chinese markings though flown by Soviet pilots, marked a major turning point in the Korean War and indeed in all of aerial warfare. Shocked by the speed, climbing ability, and high operating ceiling of the Soviet fighter, the United States hurried delivery to Korea of the new F-86 Sabre, which managed to re-establish U.S. air supremacy, in part because of a superior pilot training system instituted by the U.S. Air Force. Nevertheless, the MiG-15 virtually ended daylight bombing runs by huge, slow, World War II-era B-29 superfortresses, and Soviet pilots continued to engage in combat with US and Allied planes, even as they trained Chinese and North Koreans to fly in the new jet age. More than 15,000 MiG-15s were built, including those produced in Soviet bloc countries. At last, number 1 picking of my list is MiG-29. The Mikoyan MiG-29 Fulcrum is the embodiment of a Russian military aircraft. The interceptor and multi-role fighter aircraft MiG-29 Fulcrum uniquely combines unbelievable maneuverability with great speed. The first MiG-29 Fulcrum airframes were delivered to the Soviet Air Force in 1983. The MiG-29 Fulcrum was exported to numerous countries. Until today, more than 1,500 aircraft in various versions of the air superiority fighter MiG-29 were built. The MiG-29 Fulcrum is a modern fourth-generation supersonic fighter that can achieve more than double the speed of sound. The aircraft is comparable with the American Boeing F/A-18 Hornet or the General Dynamics F-16 Fighting Falcon. After Germany's reunification, a whole squadron of MiG-29 Fulcrum aircraft came into possession of the German Air Forces. Western military advisors were astounded by the MiG's performance after they analyzed its flight characteristics. No Western fighter could rival the MiG on a similarly high level. The flight characteristics were only matched by modern aircraft like the Eurofighter EF-2000 Typhoon or the Lockheed Martin F-22 Raptor, 30 years later. The MiG-29's flat fuselage contributes approximately 40% of the lift. This makes the MiG unbeatable in dogfights, especially at low speeds. The further development of the MiG-29 Fulcrum with 3D thrust vectoring amazes airshow spectators with maneuvers that seem to defy physics distractions that intend to disorientate enemy pilots. The MiG aircraft was often used as an umbrella term for all Soviet-built aircraft. So sometimes you can see aircraft from other manufacturers like Suchej being called a MiG. The flight and maneuvering capabilities at low speeds and/or at high angles of attack essential for close combat are unrivaled by the MiG's Western counterparts. The MiG-29 Fulcrum has two Klimo Sarkiso RD-33 reheated turbofan engines, which each produce more thrust with afterburner than any single equivalent Western engine. We came to the end. Hope you enjoyed it. Next week we are doing the same thing with American aircrafts. And after that, time for some interesting stories of aircrafts. We will see. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Much love. T-Cat.